In a village, a priest keeps an ancient manuscript that can restore lost movements. This secret challenges beliefs and could transform both medicine and faith. When science meets religion, a brave journalist investigates a mystery that could change the world. But before I tell you this story, subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. The bells of St. Benedict's Church echoed through the small town of Charleston in West Virginia. Father Anthony walked slowly along the cobblestone streets, greeting the faithful with a weary smile. At 72 years old, he carried not only the weight of age but also a secret that had been consuming him for decades. "Good morning. Mr. Anthony, the medicine for your wife has arrived," he said as he passed by the pharmacy. "God bless you, Father. You are a blessing to this town." Father Anthony simply nodded and continued his walk through the historic town. The colonial buildings held centuries of history, but none of them hid a secret as profound as the one beneath the sacristy floor. As he entered the church, he felt the familiar scent of incense and old wood. The pews were empty at that hour of the morning, except for a figure kneeling in the front row. Father Anthony narrowed his eyes, trying to recognize the visitor. It wasn't someone from the town, of that he was certain. "Can I help you?" he asked, approaching cautiously. The woman stood up and turned to him. She was young, perhaps, around 35, with brown hair tied in a messy bun and intense eyes that seemed to search for something beyond what was visible. "Father Anthony?" Her voice was firm, professional. "My name is Eleanor Silverstone. I'm a journalist from the magazine Revealed Truth. I'd like to talk about the history of this church." The priest's heart raced, but his face remained impassive. "Of course, my child. This church has nearly 300 years of history. Where would you like to begin?" Eleanor pulled a small recorder from her pocket and placed it between them. "Actually, I'm more interested in a specific story. Have you ever heard of the manuscript of St. Blaise?" Father Anthony's blood ran cold. For over 50 years, no one had mentioned that name in his presence. How did this stranger know? "I'm afraid I don't know that story," he lied, averting his gaze to the crucifix on the altar. "It's strange, Father." Eleanor opened a folder she was carrying and showed an old photograph. "Because here you are, much younger, standing next to Father Gregory Mendes, the last known guardian of the manuscript before you." Father Anthony felt his legs weaken. He sat down on the church bench, suddenly aware of the weight of his secret. "Why are you interested in this?" he asked, his voice low. Eleanor hesitated, then put away the recorder. "My son, Liam, is 12 years old. 2 years ago, he fell from a tree and lost the use of his legs. The doctors say he'll never walk again." A heavy silence hung between them before she continued. "I was a skeptic, Father. I only believed in what I could see and prove. But when you see your child suffering," her voice faltered. "A history professor from the University of West Virginia told me about an ancient manuscript that contains knowledge of healing that modern medicine can't explain. Knowledge the church has kept hidden for centuries." "And you believe that?" Father Anthony asked, studying her. "I don't know what I believe anymore. I only know I have to try everything for my son." Father Anthony slowly stood up. "Come with me." He led her to the sacristy, locking the door behind them. With precise movements, he moved an old rug, revealing a metal ring embedded in the wooden floor. With effort, he lifted the trapdoor, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. "What are you doing?" Eleanor asked, alarmed. "Showing you that you're right, but also terribly wrong." In the damp basement, illuminated only by the faint glow of a yellowed light bulb, Father Anthony unlocked an old cabinet. From inside, he retrieved a carved wooden box. "The manuscript of St. Blaise," he said, opening the box and revealing an old leather-bound book. It was written in the 17th century by a Benedictine monk who studied indigenous medicinal knowledge. They say he managed to merge this knowledge with Portuguese and African healing practices, creating something unique. Eleanor reached out for the manuscript, but the priest stepped back. "It's not that simple. This knowledge was kept secret, not to deny healing to people, but to protect them." "Protect them from what?" "From walking again. From consequences you don't understand," he replied gravely. In 1897, in the village of New Hope, in the countryside of Chicago, a priest tried to use this manuscript to heal a boy. The result was, he paused, choosing his words, something the church decided to hide forever. At that moment, Eleanor's phone rang, interrupting them. When she answered, her face turned pale. Liam, what happened?" She listened for a few seconds, then looked at the priest with panic in her eyes. "Someone broke into my house. They took my son." Before they could react, they heard footsteps in the sacristy above them. Father Anthony quickly turned off the light and pulled Eleanor behind a bookshelf. "They've found us," he murmured, clutching the manuscript to his chest. "Who?" Eleanor whispered. "The Congregation of Eternal Light. They serve the Vatican, but they have the autonomy to protect the Church's secrets. If they find out I showed you the manuscript..." A loud crash sounded above them, the sacristy door being forced open. Eleanor looked at the priest, then at the manuscript. "My son needs me. And you plan to save him with this?" "Father..." Anthony raised the book. "You don't know what you're asking for." Footsteps were now descending the stairs. A deep voice spoke in Portuguese with a heavy Italian accent. "Father Anthony, we know you're down there. It's time to hand over what doesn't belong to you." Eleanor looked at the book, then at the stairs. Whatever was written there could save her son, but first she needed to find him. "Is there another way out?" she asked in an almost inaudible whisper. Father Anthony nodded, pointing to a nearly invisible door in the stone wall. As the footsteps grew closer, he handed the manuscript to Eleanor. "Go to the chapel of Our Lady of the O in Chicago. Look for Father Joachim. Tell him I sent you. He knows the rest of the secret." "What secret?" "The manuscript alone is nothing. It's only one piece of the puzzle. The true knowledge was divided and hidden to protect humanity from itself." Eleanor took the book, hesitating. "Why are you helping me?" The old priest's gaze revealed a deep sadness. "Because I've carried this burden for too long, and because I too once had a son who couldn't walk." Before Eleanor could process this revelation, the priest pushed her toward the secret door and turned to face the intruders who were arriving. Eleanor hesitated, looking at the old man, who now seemed stronger, more resolute. "Go," he commanded. "Find your son, and remember, the manuscript demands a price few are willing to pay." With her heart racing and the precious manuscript in her hands, Eleanor disappeared into the dark tunnel as authoritative voices echoed behind her. Her journey had only just begun, and the fate of her son was now intertwined with an ancient secret many would kill to possess. The city of Chicago swallowed Eleanor with its chaotic traffic and hurried crowds. 3 days had passed since her escape from Charleston, and the manuscript remained hidden in her backpack, a constant weight on her mind. From Father Anthony there was no news. Her phone had been left behind, making any contact impossible. Eleanor walked nervously through the Brooklyn neighborhood near the chapel of Our Lady of the O. She wore sunglasses and a hat to disguise her appearance, constantly looking over her shoulder. Her son was still missing, and desperation grew with every passing minute. "What time is it?" she asked a street vendor. "Almost 5 in the afternoon, ma'am." She was late. The meeting with Father Joachim was scheduled for 4:30. According to the instructions she had received from an intermediary contact, Eleanor quickened her pace, feeling her heart race. The chapel of Our Lady of the O was small compared to the grand churches of the city, but its preserved colonial architecture made it stand out among the modern buildings. Upon entering, Eleanor found the place nearly empty, except for an elderly woman praying in a corner. No sign of Father Joachim. "Can I help you?" A soft voice surprised her. A young seminarian appeared from a side door. "I'm looking for Father Joachim," Eleanor replied, keeping her voice low. The seminarian frowned. "Father Joachim isn't here today. In fact, he was urgently called to the Vatican 2 days ago." Eleanor felt a shiver run down her spine. Too much of a coincidence. "When will he return?" "We're not sure. He left me in charge of the chapel while he's away." "I'm Philip. Can I help you with something?" Eleanor hesitated. Could she trust this young man? Before she could decide, she noticed through the window a black car pulling up in front of the chapel. Two men in suits stepped out, their alert eyes scanning the street. "I need to get out of here," she murmured, stepping back from the entrance. Philip noticed her panic and, surprisingly, gently took her arm. "This way," he said, quickly guiding her to a door at the back of the sacristy. "They've been coming every day asking about visitors. Do you know who they are?" "Not exactly, but Father Joachim left me clear instructions before he left. He said if a woman came looking for him, I should give her this." He pulled an envelope from the pocket of his cassock and help her leave unnoticed. Eleanor took the envelope, confused. How did he know? Father Anthony managed to send a message before he was taken. Taken? Where? Philip opened a door leading to a narrow alley. To Rome, from what I understand. The Congregation of Eternal Light is holding him at the Vatican for questioning. Eleanor felt her stomach drop. The old priest was in danger because of her. And my son. Do you know anything? About a kidnapped boy? The seminarian shook his head. I'm sorry, but there's something about that in the envelope. Now go before they come in. Follow the alley to the end, then turn right. There's a subway station 2 blocks away. Eleanor clutched the envelope to her chest. Thank you, Philip. Don't thank me yet, he replied grimly. You have no idea what you're up against. With those words of warning, Eleanor stepped into the alley, hearing authoritative voices entering the chapel. She ran as fast as she could, following Philip's instructions. Only when she was safely inside a subway car, blending into the crowd, did she dare open the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter and an old key. Eleanor, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't reach you in person. The manuscript you carry is only one part of a greater knowledge, divided into 3 pieces centuries ago to prevent its misuse. The Congregation of Eternal Light knows you possess the first part and will stop at nothing to retrieve it. As for your son, I have information that he is alive and well. It wasn't the congregation who took him, but another group interested in the manuscript, Aurora Veritas, a secret society of scientists and doctors who believe the Church has suppressed knowledge that could revolutionize medicine. To find your son and the second part of the manuscript, go to the National Institute of Amazonian Research in New Orleans. Look for Dr. Cecilia Mirels, an ethnobotanist who studies traditional indigenous medicine. The key in this envelope opens a locker in the Institute's library where I stored additional information many years ago. Be careful. Aurora Veritas isn't as violent as the congregation, but their methods can be equally dangerous. They believe they're doing good, but they don't understand the risks involved. May God protect you, Father Joachim. Eleanor reread the letter several times, trying to process the information. Her son was alive, and now she had a destination, New Orleans. As the subway sped through the dark tunnels of the city, Eleanor carefully tucked away the letter and the key. She needed to prepare for a trip to the north of the country, but first, she needed a safe place to spend the night and study the manuscript. On impulse, she decided to reach out to an old college friend who lived in Chicago. Rachel Fields was a history professor at the University of Chicago, and more importantly, someone Eleanor trusted. If anyone could help her decipher the ancient manuscript, it would be her. 3 hours later, sitting in Rachel's living room, in the Comfort neighborhood, Eleanor finally felt safe enough to examine the manuscript calmly. Rachel watched, fascinated, as Eleanor carefully opened the leather-bound book. This is incredible, Rachel murmured, adjusting her glasses to get a better look at the yellowed pages. It looks like a mix of archaic Portuguese with Latin, and this looks like ancient Tupi. Can you understand it? Partially. I'd need more time. But this symbol here, she pointed to an elaborate drawing on the first page. I've seen it before in studies about secret societies in colonial America. Eleanor leaned in for a closer look. It was a kind of cross, but with elements that resembled intertwined plants. What does it mean? It's the symbol of the Brotherhood of Sacred Knowledge, a group that brought together priests, doctors, and indigenous healers in the 18th century. They were said to perform miraculous healings by combining European, African, and indigenous knowledge. A sudden noise in the building's hallway made both women freeze. Footsteps were approaching the apartment. "Are you expecting someone?" Eleanor whispered. Rachel shook her head, standing up to look through the peephole. Her face turned pale. Two men in suits. One of them is showing some kind of ID to the doorman. Eleanor quickly stashed the manuscript in her backpack. "We need to get out of here. Is there another way out?" "The fire escape, through the kitchen window." As they hurried toward the kitchen, they heard firm knocks on the door. Rachel hesitated. "Go," Eleanor whispered. "If they ask, say you haven't seen me in years. Don't get involved in this." "What about you?" "I'm heading to New Orleans. I need to find my son." The knocking at the door grew more insistent. A male voice called out Rachel's name. "Go," Rachel repeated, pushing Eleanor toward the window. "And be careful. Whatever is in that manuscript, it's worth killing for." Eleanor quickly hugged her friend. "Thank you. If you can, try to find out more about the Brotherhood of Sacred Knowledge and email me. At this address," she hastily scribbled an anonymous account on a piece of paper. Seconds later, Eleanor was climbing down the fire escape as she heard Rachel open the door and confront the visitors. Her next destination was clear: New Orleans, the Amazon rainforest, and another piece of the puzzle that could save her son. On the horizon, the sun set over the city of Chicago, casting long shadows over the skyscrapers. Eleanor knew the night would only be the beginning of an even more dangerous journey. The manuscript weighed in her backpack, not just physically, but with the burden of the forbidden knowledge it carried. The humid heat of New Orleans enveloped Eleanor like a heavy blanket as soon as she stepped off the plane. After 2 layovers, and using a fake name on the documents she had obtained through contacts from her investigative journalism days, she had finally arrived in the Amazonian capital. The manuscript remained safe, hidden in a secret compartment of her specially adapted suitcase. The taxi wound through the bustling streets of the city, a surprising contrast to the vast green expanse surrounding it. Eleanor watched everything with keen eyes, searching for any sign that she was being followed. "First time in New Orleans?" the taxi driver asked. "Yes," she lied, having visited the city years before for a story. "I came to see the National Institute of Amazonian Research. The NIR, lots of foreign scientists come here, studying our forest, huh?" He smiled through the rearview mirror. "But be careful, miss. The forest holds secrets, even science can't." "Explain." Eleanor nodded, thinking of the manuscript. How deeply were its secrets intertwined with the traditional knowledge of that region? After settling into a modest hotel in the city center, Eleanor wasted no time. She dressed like a typical researcher: cargo pants, a long-sleeved shirt, and a hat to protect herself from the sun, and headed to the National Institute of Amazonian Research. The institute was a complex of modern buildings surrounded by preserved fragments of forest. At the reception, Helena introduced herself as a journalist interested in traditional medicine, requesting an interview with Dr. Cecilia Mirel. "The doctor is in the field today," the receptionist informed her, "but she should return tomorrow. Can I schedule it for you?" Helena hid her disappointment. "Of course, and the library? Can I visit it while I wait?" "Certainly. 3rd floor, at the end of the hallway. The Library of the National Institute of Amazonian Research was impressive. Tall shelves filled with scientific books, theses, and manuscripts on Amazonian biodiversity. Helena walked slowly between the shelves, discreetly observing the few researchers present, until she found an isolated corner with old filing cabinets. Making sure no one was watching, she took out the key Father Joachim had sent her. The number 137 was engraved on it. Helena examined the cabinets until she found the corresponding one, a metal drawer in the farthest corner of the library. The key turned with a soft click. Inside, she found a yellowed folder with the symbol of the Brotherhood of Sacred Knowledge, the same cross intertwined with plants she had seen in the manuscript. Her heart raced as she opened the folder. It contained old maps of the Amazon region, with notes in various languages, a few handwritten diary pages, and black and white photographs of symbols similar to those in the manuscript, carved into stones. Amidst the forest. Interesting reading. Helena startled, instinctively closing the folder. A middle-aged woman, with graying hair tied in a bun and piercing eyes behind thin-framed glasses, was watching her curiously. "Sorry, I didn't mean to startle you," the woman continued. "I'm Cecilia Mirels." Helena blinked, surprised. "But they said you wouldn't be back until tomorrow." A slight smile crossed the scientist's lips. "That's what I tell people when they ask for me without an appointment. Give me time to investigate who is looking for me." She glanced meaningfully at the folder in Eleanor's hands. "How did you get the key to that file?" Eleanor hesitated, then decided to take the risk. "Father Joachim sent me." Cecilia's face turned serious. "Come with me. It's not safe to talk here." They walked in silence through the Institute's hallways until they reached a small, isolated laboratory. Cecilia locked the door behind them and closed the blinds. "How long have you had the manuscript?" she asked directly. Eleanor took a step back, alarmed. "How do you know?" "Because I recognize the desperation in your eyes. It's the same one I saw in the mirror for years." Cecilia unbuttoned her sleeve and rolled it up, revealing a deep scar that ran the length of her arm. "I also searched for the manuscript 20 years ago to heal this and much more." "Did you find it?" "Parts of it. Enough to understand why it was divided and hidden, enough to know that its power comes with a terrible price." Eleanor placed the folder on the table between them. "My son was kidnapped. I need to find him. And if the manuscript can make him walk again." "Aurora Veritas," Cecilia murmured. "They took your son, didn't they?" Eleanor's eyes widened. "How do you know?" "Because I was one of them." Before I understood what was really at stake, she took a deep breath. "Eleanor, it wasn't a coincidence that you came to me. We've been waiting for you." "We have?" "The Brotherhood still exists, not in the same way as during the colonial period, but we maintain the original purpose, to protect sacred knowledge until humanity is ready for it." Eleanor laughed without humor. "And who decides when we'll be ready? It's not a matter of deciding, but of natural evolution. The manuscript doesn't just contain healing formulas, Eleanor. It holds the understanding of the connection between body, mind, and spirit that our ancestors grasped, but which we've lost over time." "And my son, where is he?" Cecilia sighed. "The headquarters of Aurora Veritas is on a farm 100 kilometers from here, near a Navajo indigenous village. They're trying to combine the knowledge from the manuscript with modern technology. Your son is there, not as a prisoner, but as a patient." "A patient?" Eleanor felt her blood run cold. "Are they experimenting on him?" "Not in the way you're imagining. Aurora believes they're doing good. They want to prove that ancient knowledge can be scientifically validated. Your son is perfect for them, young with a potentially reversible condition and connected to the manuscript through you." Eleanor stood up, determined. "I need to go." "There now." "Not alone," Cecilia held her arm. "They have armed security, and besides, the most important thing isn't rescuing your son, but preventing them from misusing the manuscript." "What do you mean?" "Of course my son is more important. You don't understand. The manuscript isn't just a text, Eleanor. It's a code, a key to something greater. The last time it was misused, an entire village in Para suffered irreversible consequences." "What kind of consequences?" Cecilia hesitated. "In the village of Holy Cross of Arari, in 1942, a missionary doctor tried to use the manuscript to cure the victims of an epidemic, but he didn't fully understand the instructions. The result was that the entire village developed a form of collective consciousness. Their minds merged somehow. They became like zombies without individuality. The church and the government intervened, quarantined the area. Officially, it was recorded as an outbreak of an unknown tropical disease." Eleanor felt a shiver run down her spine. "And the people, what happened to them?" "They were contained. The village was evacuated and declared a military security zone. To this day, the survivors and their descendants live in an isolated community under constant observation." Eleanor sat back down, stunned by the revelation. "Why would the manuscript be so dangerous?" "Because it's not just a medicinal text. It's part of ancient knowledge predating colonization that understood the connection between matter and consciousness in a way that our modern science is only beginning to grasp through quantum physics. Cecilia opened the folder and pointed to the maps. These marked locations are portals, Eleanor, places where the barrier between the physical and the metaphysical is thinnest. That sounds like mysticism, not science. The line between the two is thinner than we imagine. Indigenous peoples knew this. The ancient European alchemists too. The Brotherhood was formed when these knowledges met in colonial America. Cecilia checked her watch. We have a few hours before Aurora Veritas realizes you're in the city. If you still want to rescue your son, we need to act fast. How do you know they'll find me? Because they have people everywhere, even here at the Institute. She lowered her voice. Besides, the Congregation of Eternal Light sent a representative to New Orleans yesterday. Cardinal Ferreira arrived discreetly, but I have informants at the airport. Eleanor felt a chill in her stomach upon hearing about the Cardinal. She was being hunted from both sides. What do we do now? Tonight we'll head to the Navajo village. I have friends there, including the shaman Ronan, who knows more about the manuscript than any academic. Tomorrow morning we infiltrate Aurora Veritas headquarters. Eleanor nodded, feeling a mix of fear and determination. What about the manuscript? Bring it, but keep it hidden. We'll need it to negotiate if necessary. As the sun began to set over the Amazon rainforest, Eleanor followed Cecilia to the Institute's parking lot. The scientist drove an old Jeep, perfect for the rough roads leading to the indigenous village. Along the way, the intense green of the forest enveloped the road like a living tunnel, while the last rays of sunlight filtered through the treetops. How did you get involved in all this? Eleanor asked, breaking the silence. Cecilia kept her eyes on the narrow road. My husband was an anthropologist. During an expedition, he contracted a rare illness. The doctors couldn't diagnose it, much less treat it. He withered away. Day by day, her voice faltered slightly. That's when a colleague mentioned the manuscript. He said it contained medical knowledge that could save anyone. And you believe that? When despair is great enough, we believe in anything. I gathered all the information I could, tracked fragments of the manuscript for years. Aurora Veritas found me during that search. They said we shared the same goal. And your husband? Oh. Heavy silence filled the Jeep before Cecilia answered. I found the manuscript too late for him, but soon enough to understand that its power wasn't meant to be used lightly. The price is always greater than we imagine. Eleanor felt a chill despite the heat. What price? The manuscript doesn't create cures out of thin air, Eleanor. It manipulates energy, the energy of life. To heal someone, that energy has to come from somewhere or someone. Like a sacrifice, Eleanor asked, horrified. More like an exchange. One person's healing comes at the cost of another. The manuscript merely facilitates that transfer. Father Anthony's words echoed in Eleanor's mind. The manuscript demands a price few are willing to pay. Night had fully fallen by the time they finally reached the Navajo village, a cluster of traditional dwellings mixed with some modern structures. The light of bonfires and lanterns cast a play of shadows among the trees. An elderly man, his face marked with traditional paint and wearing a headdress of red feathers, approached the Jeep as soon as they parked. Cecilia. He greeted her in Portuguese, his voice surprisingly strong for his frail appearance. You finally brought her. Were you expecting her? Cecilia asked, surprised. The shaman Ronan looked directly at Eleanor, his ancient eyes seeming to see right through her. The spirits of the forest speak. The manuscript chooses its bearers. And now the three fragments are coming together once more. He pointed toward the dark forest beyond the village. The forbidden knowledge is awakening, and with it, dangers that have lain dormant for centuries. The dawn in the Navajo village brought with it a blanket of mist that hung over the forest like a restless spirit. Eleanor had slept little, haunted by fragmented dreams where she saw her son Liam calling out to her amidst symbols that seemed to leap from the pages of the manuscript. Sitting at the door of the hut where she had spent the night, she watched the shaman Ronan conduct a morning ritual. The elder moved with surprising agility for his age, chanting in a language Eleanor did not understand. "He is strengthening the spiritual protections of the village," explained Cecilia, approaching with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. "Aurora Veritas and the congregation already know we're here." "How can they know?" Eleanor accepted the drink gratefully. "The manuscript emits a vibration, so to speak. Those who are attuned can sense it, especially when it is near the other fragments." Eleanor instinctively touched the backpack where she kept the precious document. "What exactly is Aurora Veritas? You mentioned you were once a member." Cecilia sat beside her, her eyes following the shaman's movements. "It was founded in the late 19th century by doctors and scientists who discovered references to the manuscripts in ancient texts. Initially, it was a group dedicated to preserving traditional knowledge that modern medicine was ignoring. Over time, it became more ambitious," she sighed. "They believe humanity is ready for the next evolutionary step, and that the manuscripts hold the key to it. And the Congregation of Eternal Light? The exact opposite. For them, there is knowledge that must remain hidden until humanity is spiritually prepared, which, in their view, we are still far from achieving." Ronan approached, having completed his ritual. Despite his fragile appearance, he emanated an aura of power and ancestral wisdom that Eleanor could almost physically feel. "The manuscript you carry," he said in perfect English, pointing to Eleanor's backpack, "is only the first key. The second is with the men of science, those who believe they can control what they do not understand." "My son is with them," Eleanor replied, her voice choked. "I need to find him." "Yes, but not just to rescue him," Ronan said, sitting down, in front of them, crossing his legs with surprising flexibility. "The boy has been chosen. His condition is not an accident, but part of a greater plan." Eleanor felt a wave of anger. "Are you saying my son is paralyzed because of some plan? What kind of cruel fate is that?" Ronan remained unmoved by her fury. "Pain awakens us to greater truths, daughter of the sun. Your son carries in his blood the lineage of the ancient guardians, like you." Eleanor looked at Cecilia, confused. "What is he talking about?" "The Brotherhood of Sacred Knowledge did not choose its members randomly," the scientist explained. "They believed certain family lineages had a predisposition to understand and channel the knowledge of the manuscripts." "This is absurd. My family is normal. My father was an engineer, my mother a teacher." Ronan smiled, revealing surprisingly white and perfect teeth. "Your paternal grandmother, Teresa Irasima, wasn't she a well-known healer in her region?" Eleanor felt a shiver. How could he know that? She was a midwife and knew medicinal herbs. "And your son draws symbols in the margins of his notebooks. Symbols he's never seen before, but that feel familiar." The shaman's words hit her like a punch. Liam, in fact, had a habit of drawing intricate patterns, spirals, and geometric shapes that his teachers found fascinating. She had always attributed it to his creativity. "How do you know that?" "The spirits speak, and time is not a straight line, but a circle. The past, the present, and the future dance together in the great web of existence." Cecilia interrupted, practical as ever. "What Ronan is trying to say is that you and your son have a special connection to the manuscript. That's why Aurora Veritas took it. Not just as bait for you, but because they believe he might be the key to fully deciphering the text." Eleanor stood up, determined. "Then we have no time to waste. How do we get to their base?" "I have a plan," said Cecilia, "but first we need to prepare." 3 hours later, a jeep approached a property surrounded by a high-security fence, about 70 kilometers from the Navajo village. From the outside, the farm looked like a typical agricultural research center, with signs indicating studies on sustainable crops in the Amazon. Eleanor, dressed as a lab assistant in a white coat, and her hair pulled back into a severe bun, held a clipboard and tried to control her nerves. Beside her, Cecilia confidently drove toward the security booth. "Remember," Cecilia murmured as she slowed down, "you're Dr. Marina Santos, my new assistant from Chicago. Keep your head down and let me do the talking." The booth was occupied by 2 professional-looking men, more like corporate security than armed guards. "Dr. Morels," one of them greeted, recognizing Cecilia. "We weren't expecting your visit today." Change of plans, she replied with authority. I received the results of the samples we sent for analysis in Chicago, and we need to adjust the protocol urgently. This is Dr. Santos, a specialist in genetic recombination. The guard briefly examined Eleanor, then checked a tablet. I don't see your name on the authorized visitor list. Of course not. It was a last-minute decision by Dr. Mendez. Cecilia mentioned the name casually. Call him if you want to. Confirm, but I doubt he'll appreciate being interrupted during preparations for this afternoon's test. The mention of a test made Eleanor tighten her fingers around the clipboard. Were they planning something with Liam today? After a moment of hesitation, the guard nodded and raised the gate. Proceed directly to the main laboratory, please. All visitors must remain in designated areas. Of course, replied Cecilia, speeding the jeep along the dirt path leading to the main complex. As soon as they were away from the guard post, Eleanor whispered, "It worked. Who is this Dr. Mendez?" The current leader of Aurora Veritas in America, and coincidentally a former student of Father Joachim in his youth, Cecilia parked the jeep near a modern two-story building. He's not here today. He's in Washington, D.C., trying to secure more government funding for ethnobotanical research. The complex was surprisingly modern for its remote location. Several low-rise buildings with solar panels on their roofs were scattered across the property. People in lab coats moved between the buildings, carrying equipment and samples. It looks more like a legitimate research center than a den of fanatics, observed Eleanor. That's what makes them dangerous. Most of the scientists here believe they're working on legitimate Amazonian biodiversity projects. Only the inner circle knows the true mission. They got out of the jeep and walked confidently toward the main building. Cecilia occasionally greeted a researcher, introducing Eleanor as her new assistant. No one questioned their presence. "Where would Liam be?" whispered Eleanor as they entered the air-conditioned building. "Probably in the rehabilitation center, that smaller building in the back with the glass dome." Eleanor looked in the indicated direction, and her heart raced. She was so close to her son. "Let's go there, then." "Not yet," Cecilia grabbed her arm. "We need to find the second fragment of the manuscript first. Without it, we can't stop what they're planning. My son comes first, always." "Eleanor," Cecilia lowered her voice, looking intensely into her eyes. "They're going to use your son as a conductor in the ritual. If we don't stop this, he risks suffering irreversible damage, worse than never walking again." Eleanor's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "The manuscript needs a conductor, someone with the right lineage to channel its power. Your son has been chosen for this. If the ritual is performed incorrectly, his mind could permanently disconnect from his body." Eleanor felt her legs weaken, leaning against the nearest wall. "How do we stop this?" "We need the second fragment. Together, the first two fragments allow us to control the process. Without it, it's like trying to drive a car at 200 km/h without a steering wheel." They walked down a corridor to a more restricted area of the building. Cecilia used an access card Eleanor didn't know she had. "You still have access? I thought you'd left the group." "Officially, yes, but I've maintained connections. Besides, my work at the National Institute of Amazonian Research gives me legitimacy to visit occasionally." The door opened to a high-tech laboratory. In the center, a glass chamber contained what looked like a small book floating in a force field, surrounded by sensors and monitoring equipment. "The second fragment," Cecilia whispered, "protected by cutting-edge technology and electromagnetic fields. How do we get it?" Before Cecilia could answer, a deep voice sounded behind them. "You don't." Turning around, Eleanor faced a tall, middle-aged man with graying hair and intensely blue eyes that contrasted with his tan skin. He wore a pristine lab coat and had a curiously serene expression. "Dr. Richard Viana?" Cecilia greeted him with a tense nod. "I didn't expect to find you here today." "Nor did I expect your visit, Cecilia, especially with such interesting company." His eyes fixed on Eleanor. "You must be the boy's mother, Eleanor Silverstone, the journalist who found the first fragment." "Where is my son?" demanded Eleanor, abandoning any pretense of disguise. "Safe and well cared for, I assure you," Richard replied with unsettling calm. and about to make history. In a few hours, your son will be able to walk again, and with that he will prove that the knowledge of the manuscripts is real and applicable." "At what cost?" interjected Cecilia. "You know the manuscript demands an exchange. Who will pay the price for the boy's cure?" Richard smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We've evolved beyond that limitation, Cecilia. Our technology can now amplify and distribute the effect, minimizing the individual impact." "You can't cheat the fundamental laws of the universe, Richard." Cecilia's voice trembled with anger. "Energy has to come from somewhere. Who are the donors?" A glint of fanaticism lit up the scientist's eyes. Volunteers dedicated to the cause. Each will donate only a fraction of their vitality. A small sacrifice for a greater good. Eleanor felt nauseous as she understood what was being discussed. "You're going to drain the life energy of people to heal my son, without his or my consent?" "Your son will be a pioneer, Eleanor, the first of many. Imagine a world where paralysis is just a temporary condition, where no child has to suffer like Liam suffered. Isn't that what you want? Not like this, not at the expense of others." Richard sighed, like a teacher disappointed with stubborn students. "You two shouldn't be here. But since you are," he pressed a button on his wristwatch, "I think you need to see what we're about to achieve. Maybe then you'll understand the greatness of our vision." Seconds later, 2 security guards entered the lab. Eleanor instinctively stepped back, but Cecilia remained still. "Escort our guest to the rehabilitation center," Richard ordered. "It's time to reunite mother and son, and the manuscripts, finally." As they were led through the halls, Eleanor whispered to Cecilia, "You knew this would happen, didn't you? This was your plan from the start." Cecilia didn't respond immediately. When she finally spoke, her voice was almost inaudible. "Sometimes, to defeat your enemy, you have to let them think they've won. The shaman Ronan didn't send just the 2 of us. Help is on the way." A spark of hope ignited in Eleanor's chest. Maybe there was still a chance to save Liam and stop Aurora Veritas from unleashing forces they couldn't control. As they walked toward the rehabilitation center, the Amazonian sun shone relentlessly over the property, like a silent witness to the drama about to unfold. In her backpack, the manuscript seemed to pulse with a life of its own, as if responding to the proximity of its long-lost sibling. The rehabilitation center was an impressive structure. Its glass dome allowed natural light to flood the space, creating an almost ethereal effect on the tropical plants that adorned the interior. At the center of the circular space, a raised platform had been built, surrounded by state-of-the-art medical equipment and advanced computers. And there, lying on an adapted hospital bed, was Liam. "Son." Just Eleanor tried to run to him, but the guards held her back. The boy, only 12 years old, turned his head toward the familiar voice. His eyes, the same greenish-brown hue as his mother's, widened in surprise and joy. "Mom!" he exclaimed, trying to sit up but restrained by the straps that held him to the bed. "I knew you'd come." Eleanor struggled against the guard's grip, tears streaming down her face. "Are they hurting you? What have they done to you?" "I'm fine, Mom," replied Liam, surprisingly calm. "They've treated me well. They say they're going to make me walk again. Is it true?" Dr. Richard approached Liam's bed, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder in a gesture that seemed genuinely affectionate. "Your son is extraordinary, Mrs. Silverstone. In just a few days, he's grasped concepts that many of our scientists took years to understand. His potential is remarkable." "Take your hands off my son," Eleanor hissed, still struggling against the guards. Richard sighed and gestured for them to release her. Eleanor immediately ran to Liam, hugging him tightly and checking for any visible injuries. "I'm fine, Mom, really," insisted Liam, wiping her tears with a small, delicate hand. "The doctors here are nice. They've shown me amazing things." Eleanor looked at her son with growing concern. There was something different in his eyes, a glimmer of understanding that seemed beyond his years. "What have they done to you?" she asked, this time in a whisper. "We showed him the truth," Richard replied, stepping forward with the second fragment of the manuscript carefully placed in a glass case. "We showed him who he truly is, a conductor, a channel, someone who can unite the physical and metaphysical worlds." Cecilia, who had been observing everything with calculated attention, finally spoke. "Did you read the manuscript to him? A 12-year-old boy? Do you know what that could do to a developing mind?" "He didn't just listen, he understood." Ricardo's voice carried a tone of reverence. "In fact, he complimented our translation at several crucial points. As I said, extraordinary." Helena now noticed that the rehabilitation center was slowly filling with people. Men and women in white lab coats positioned themselves in a circle around the central platform. Others, dressed in casual clothes, sat in chairs arranged in a wider outer circle. She quickly counted. There were 30 people. "The donors," Cecilia murmured beside her. 30 volunteers for the sacrifice." "It's not a sacrifice," corrected Ricardo, who apparently had sharp ears. "It's a contribution. Each will donate only a fraction of their vital energy. No one will suffer lasting effects." "That's what you tell them," Cecilia shot back. "But you know the fundamental laws of the manuscript. Energy cannot be diluted indefinitely. Some of them will feel the impact more than others. Some may not survive." A murmur of concern swept through the room. Clearly not everyone present was aware of this risk. "These are acceptable risks for the greater good," Ricardo replied, his voice hardening. "Now, Miss Silverstone, we need the first fragment to complete the ritual." Helena instinctively clutched the backpack to her chest. "And if I refuse?" The scientist smiled humorlessly. "Then your son will remain as he is, and all the potential he has shown will stay forever dormant. Is that what you want for him?" Liam held his mother's hand. "It's okay, Mom, I want to do this. Not just for me, I've seen what's in the manuscript. It can help so many people." Eleanor looked at her son, shocked by the maturity in his voice. "Liam, you don't understand the risks." "I do understand." He squeezed her hand. "Better than you think. I dreamed about this even before. I knew about the manuscript. Drawings, symbols. They've always been in my head." A shiver ran down Eleanor's spine as she remembered the words of the shaman Ronan. The boy had been chosen. His condition was no accident. At that moment, the doors of the rehabilitation center burst open violently. A commanding figure entered, followed by 2 stern-looking men. The newcomer wore formal clerical robes, and a silver cross hung from his chest. "Cardinal Ferreira," Cecilia whispered, visibly tensing. The cardinal, a tall man with striking features and graying hair, strode into the room with authority. His piercing grey eyes swept the space before settling on Eleanor and the boy. "Too late, as always, Your Eminence," Richard remarked, not hiding the disdain in his voice. "Science once again surpasses superstition. Arrogance," replied the cardinal in Portuguese, heavy with an Italian accent. "The same arrogance that led to the tragedy of Holy Cross of Arari. History repeats itself because fools like you refuse to learn from it." Eleanor looked from one to the other, confused. "Do you know each other?" "We are old adversaries," replied the cardinal. "For 30 years I have tried to prevent this man from repeating the mistakes of the past." "Mistakes?" Richard laughed bitterly. "The only mistake was halting the experiment before its completion. Today we will not make the same error." A sudden movement at the entrance caught everyone's attention. The shaman Ronan entered calmly, accompanied by several Navajo tribesmen. Their ceremonial body paint gleamed under the light streaming through the glass dome. "It is too late to stop what began centuries ago," the elder spoke, his voice echoing with surprising authority. "The manuscripts have sought their guardians. The cycle completes itself today." "Who allowed him in?" demanded Richard, visibly agitated. "I did," replied a familiar voice. Everyone turned to see Father Anthony entering slowly. Leaning on a cane, he looked older and more tired than when Eleanor had last seen him in Charleston. "Father!" exclaimed Eleanor, surprised to see him there. "I thought you were imprisoned in the Vatican." "I was." He exchanged a meaningful glance with the cardinal, until we realized we had a common enemy. The rehabilitation center was now buzzing with tension. On one side, the Aurora Veritas team and their volunteers. On the other, the cardinal with his assistants, the shaman with his warriors, and the old priest who had started this entire journey. In the center, Eleanor, Liam, and the two fragments of the manuscript. "The time has come to choose, Eleanor," said Richard, extending his hand. "Hand over the manuscript and allow your son to fulfill his destiny. Or stay with these fanatics and condemn him to a life of limitations." Liam looked at his mother, his eyes pleading. "I'm not afraid, Mom. I understand what needs to be done." Eleanor looked at each person present, her thoughts in turmoil. Then slowly she opened her backpack and took out the ancient manuscript. "There is a third option," she said, her voice steady despite the fear she felt, "one that none of you have considered." "And what would that be?" asked Richard impatiently. 2. Ask the true guardian what he desires." She handed the manuscript to Liam, whose eyes widened in surprise. "The manuscript chose my son. Not you, not the church, not the brotherhood. He is the conductor, the decision is his." A stunned silence filled the room as Liam held the two manuscripts, one in each hand. To everyone's surprise, the ancient documents began to emit a soft bluish glow. "Impossible," murmured the cardinal. "The third fragment, it's not here." "It doesn't need to be," replied Ronan, observing the phenomenon with calm. "The boy is the third fragment, the living knowledge, the manuscript incarnate." Liam closed his eyes, his face serene despite the chaos around him. When he reopened them, there was an ancient wisdom in them, as if he could see beyond time and space. "Knowledge was never meant to heal just one," he said, his voice strangely mature and resonant, "nor to be used as power. It is a balance, a harmony, a dance between giving and receiving." The glow of the manuscripts intensified, expanding, in concentric waves that first enveloped Liam, then Eleanor, and gradually the entire room. "What's happening?" asked Richard, stepping back in alarm. "The true purpose of the manuscripts," replied Father Anthony, observing the phenomenon with reverence. "Not the healing of the body, but the healing of the divide between science and faith, between knowledge and wisdom." The light pulsed now, creating intricate patterns that seemed to respond to Liam's heartbeat. The boy levitated a few inches above the bed, the manuscripts floating before him. Eleanor tried to reach him, but Cecilia held her back. "Don't interfere. He knows what he's doing." "How can you be sure?" "Because he's doing what none of us had the courage to do. He's becoming the bridge." The light reached its peak, so intense that everyone had to shield their eyes. When it finally subsided, Liam was lying on the bed again, the manuscripts open on his chest. But something had changed. A palpable energy filled the room. With slow, deliberate movements, Liam sat up on the bed. Then, to everyone's astonishment, he swung his legs to the side and stood up. "Liam!" Eleanor ran to him, embracing him as tears of joy streamed down her face. "You're walking." The boy smiled, but there was a deep weariness in his eyes. "It wasn't free, Mom." He looked at the volunteers in the outer circle. Some seemed exhausted, others confused. Everyone gave a little. "I was just the conduit." Richard approached, stunned. "You channeled the energy equally." "That is theoretically impossible. The manuscript demands a principal sacrifice." "Demanded," corrected Liam softly, "until someone understood that the true power lies not in the cure itself, but in the shared intention, in the connection." Cardinal Ferreira knelt before the boy, a surprising gesture of humility. The Church was right to protect the knowledge, but wrong in how it did so. It was not meant to be hidden, but shared with wisdom. Ronan approached, smiling at Liam. "The cycle is complete. Will the manuscripts return to the earth now?" Liam looked at the ancient documents in his hands. Slowly, before the astonished eyes of everyone, they began to disintegrate, turning into golden dust that floated in the air like particles of light. "We no longer need them," said the boy. "The knowledge is here." He touched his forehead, and here he touched his heart. "In all of us. It always has been." Eleanor embraced her son again, barely able to believe that he was truly standing, truly healed. "Is it over?" she asked, looking at Cecilia, at the priest, at everyone present. Liam smiled, a smile that blended the innocence of a child with the wisdom of an elder. "No, Mother. It's only just beginning." In the days that followed, extraordinary news began to emerge across America. People with chronic illnesses reported inexplicable improvements. Patients deemed hopeless awoke from deep comas. Children with congenital disabilities showed progress that baffled doctors. It was as if a wave of healing was spreading across the country, defying both scientific and religious explanations. In the Navajo village, Eleanor and Liam stayed for weeks, learning from Ronan the secrets that the manuscripts had only hinted at. Aurora Veritas was dissolved, its members dispersing to share the new understanding in hospitals, universities, and communities around the world. The Congregation of Eternal Light, under the reformed leadership of Cardinal Ferreira, opened the Vatican's secret archives related to mystical healings, initiating an unprecedented dialogue between science and faith. And Dr. Cecilia Mireles, together with Father Anthony, founded the Institute of Integrative Studies, dedicated to uniting ancestral knowledge with modern medicine, free from dogma or limitations. On a golden afternoon, as she watched Liam, running with other children from the village, Eleanor finally understood the true miracle she had witnessed. It wasn't just the physical healing of her son, but the awakening of a greater consciousness, a reminder that all divisions between science and spirituality, modern and ancestral, individual and collective, were illusory. The manuscript hadn't created something new. It had simply reminded them of a truth that had always existed. The capacity for healing lay within every human being, waiting only for the right key to awaken it. And as the sun set over the Amazon rainforest, Eleanor felt certain that the journey that had begun with despair and fear had transformed into the first step of a new era. An era where ancestral secrets and modern knowledge would no longer oppose each other, but would dance together in the great web of existence. Liam came running back to her, his eyes shining with life and possibilities. "Mom," he said, taking her hand, "there's still so much to do, so many people to help." Eleanor smiled, caressing her son's face. "And we'll do it together. One step at a time." On the horizon, the first glimmer of stars appeared in the Amazonian sky, like fragments of a cosmic manuscript just beginning to reveal its secrets. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the journey of Eleanor and Liam has touched your hearts. To continue exploring stories of transformation and hope like this one, we've prepared a special playlist that can be accessed by clicking the link on the left side of the screen. If this narrative stirred something within you, be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Every day we bring new stories that explore the mysteries of life and the possibilities of the human spirit. Share your thoughts in the comments. Your experience might be the light someone is searching for. Until the next story,